Hi everyone, my name is Renee Huang and I'm the founder of Wild Women Tribe and the host of Ignite Podcast. We're here today to talk to you about the idea of release. And our guests today are Nikki Glandon and Christie Babalis. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you,
Thank
Renee.
you.
So Christie and I worked together back in the day, and you're a corporate attorney. I guess that's how you would define yourself?
I am. I'm an in-house counsel for a company right now, and I have been in-house counsel for different companies for the last long time.
But I know you as well as someone who sits on many boards, and you're an avid outdoors woman. You're so connected with the desert, and I think that's one of the things that when I started Wild Women Tribe, you were really encouraging of. So I think that's kind of how our circles intersect.
Yeah.
And then Nikki and I have actually done some work together. She is a yogi and a coach and a transformational dragonfly lady in and of herself. So I'm super excited to have you,
Thank you.
Here as well. We are going to dive right into the topic of release, which is an interesting one because it might come off as being negative, but I think it's such a positive idea to embody and to feel comfortable with, and to use as a way to propel yourself forward in life. Did you want to start off, Christine, maybe share what your thoughts are on that concept?
I will. Gosh, that's such a big topic, and for me, gosh, I feel like a big chunk of my life has been about figuring out how to release. So I'm not sure where to start. But
has it been different through the ages and stages of your life?
Well, I think that there is no one answer to how you release, and there's books written about it, and there's philosophies, and lots of people have different methods that they would talk about. For me personally, I think it's taken time and maturity and lots of self-reflection and years to figure out how to release. I think it depends on what you're releasing. If you're releasing something, really deep seated inside, something maybe that happened to you or that's impacted you since you were a child, I think that takes a whole different process than maybe something that happens to you as an adult, where you're much more equipped and emotionally mature to be able to look at what it means and yeah. So I think it depends on what happens and when it happened. So I don't think there's one answer to how you release, but it is certainly a process. But it's so healing when you finally are able to release.
And I think maybe a little later on we'll talk about specific times in your life,
Okay.
To share examples of where you've had to release. But I wanted to hear from Nikki and to hear your perspectives as well.
I really agree. I think that certain times in your life and depending on the circumstance is going to change how you are able to release. Like, I thought of an Instapot. I don't know if you guys have used these, but they're great, right? And there's a release valve on it. And some of recipes call for it to release slowly, and some recipes call for it to just like release quickly, And I think that's a great analogy to look at how to move through release in life. Sometimes things release slow and it takes a while, and sometimes it's like, okay, you just know you're done, and then you can move on. And I think release is really important to make way for the good stuff, instead of holding on to everything. And so that's where the importance of release can really translate transition into life.
I think for me, release is something that is a bit counterintuitive as a control freak because I want everything to go the way that I see it, even if it's not for my own good. Mm-hmm. So I love what you're saying about the slow release or the fast release, because I think some of the more difficult times in my life have been because I could release quickly, but that's scary, so I hold on, and then it's like festering, and it feels uncomfortable, and I'm like fighting against what might be the natural progression of things, but I want to control. And
Right.
so I think for me, release has been a lot about like just letting the things that need to happen, even if they're scary or I don't like them or it's not what I envisioned, but just like not having so much resistance in situations.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything that you wanted to?
Well, no, I think that's interesting because it's hard. It's hard to know when you're used to controlling your environment, and it's really hard to go through that process of letting things go and letting what is going to happen. That's so hard. I can think specifically of a situation where a difficult situation where I was trying so hard to control the outcome, and finally one day I used to go to this little field behind my house, and it was so pretty, and there was a old front seat or back seat from a truck that somebody had put out there in the field, and I would go sit on that seat and just talk. And I don't know who I was talking to, but I was just talking. Maybe I was just talking to myself, or some whatever energy was out there. But I remember saying, just show me the path. I don't know the path. I'm stuck, and my way isn't working. Please show me the path, and don't let me miss the signs. Show me the path, guide me. And I would do that every day, and at about the same time, and it was at sunset, and it was so pretty. And for me, being outside is very healing anyway. But that was one method in that particular situation of just giving in and saying, okay, I don't know how to do this. I need some help. Show me the path. And of course, like most things in life, they resolve themselves and things get figured out. But I think being open to it and being able to let go, releasing of whatever you've thought is the proper way that you should move forward, let go and let in whatever's going to come your way. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful.
That was one situation I thought of while you were talking about that.
Do you have any tools as well? I mean, it seems like that was a way that you kind of reached beyond yourself and kind of asked for things. Do you have any tools, Nikki, that you use when you're in that, or any practices that you?
It's so interesting listening, because there are times that I've gone and I've sat on a mountaintop and I've prayed and hoped and wished and just put it, trying to say, okay, I can't do it on my own. I try to. So there's the letting go of control and surrender, which I'm feeling are really close to release, like, okay, just taking that breath. And then there's times where it's like a punching bag, right? And needing to use that tool, that modality to release, whatever it may be. But figuring out a healthy course to release it is, I think, the tools that I use. And each one's different. Some days it's a little of both, a little bit of sitting in a field, and then like a good workout or a conversation with a friend. And I think honoring what each situation is going to be the most important, and knowing that they're not going to be the same. Like, you don't eat the same meal every day, you don't wear the same clothes every day. Every situation is going to be different as well.
Yeah.
Were you guys able to share moments where you feel like release didn't happen, or it was like a turning point where you realized, oh wait, I have to move beyond this? Part of the question is, I think it's really great to talk about the uplifting positive aspects of this, but as well, I think we can share a lot of wisdom in the challenging times that maybe brought us through to these realizations. So I'm just curious if there's any moments that you can think of or examples.
Yeah, there are. So for me, and this is going to sound like such a cliche. So I had some difficult period of time when I was little with somebody, and somebody very important and very influential in my life. And I think it started probably from the time I was born, but because I remember being really, really young and really sad and really angry and really hurt and really confused. And that particular issue, which was huge, and it's funny because now I look, it's hard to even talk about, not because it's emotional, but because it's so gone now, and it doesn't hurt to bring it up, but it's I released that, it's gone, but it's part of my history, and so, but I remember it really wasn't until I was well into adulthood that I figured out that I was part of the problem. Even though for so long I thought, well, gosh, I was so little, how could I have been part of the problem? Well, maybe I wasn't then, but as I got older, I certainly contributed to the problematic relationship. And so I think when I finally figured out that I didn't need to, the whole course of fixing this wasn't to go talk to somebody and talk about how awful this other person was. When I finally figured out, oh my gosh, I'm a contributor to this, then that was such a huge release for me. And anger went away and hatred went away, and then I could start actually healing and release that. But that's what it took, is not looking at somebody else as the problem, even though arguably that's how it started. But then once you figure out it's not just that person, then you can also get compassion and realize, wow, what happened to this person that may have caused them to be this way? And then when you get compassion, then that also helps release. So I know I'm being vague, and I know, and I know I'm also dragging on, but right. Anyway, that was a long process, and it took me, I think, well into my 30s to get to that point of letting go of my anger and the hatred, which was my problem, and realizing, oh my gosh, for all these years I've been contributing to this, and then wow, what a release that was. And now with this person I have this amazing relationship. And it's hard for me to even recall that this bad stuff happened. I mean, I know it did, but it's just so.
But it's so empowering,
distant. Yeah.
right? When you realize, whoa, I'm the architect of my own story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? So something could have happened, and you can look at it from like a victim standpoint, or you can say, okay, I move through compassion to forgiveness, and the forgiveness is for you.
That's right.
Right? It's not for the other person. It's for you to just let it go and say, okay, I'm not defined by this, neither is this other person.
Right.
Right? And then to allow that negative energy that's holding you in your story, which is kind of keeping you stuck in a way.
That's right. That's absolutely
to kind of just fall apart and fall away and move towards positive creation, right?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate the time, but on that note, I think what happens is you do create this story. And so my story was, oh my gosh, this person's been horrible to me. I've had such a crappy experience. Oh my gosh, my childhood was horrible. So that became my story. And then you have masks and walls and stuff that you build, and then all of a sudden you don't really even know who you are until you release all of that stuff.
And then you create a new story.
And then you create a new story. Yeah.
Well, Nikki's nodding and smiling.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's great.
Do you have something to share as well, where you have moved through release or learned through some examples in your life?
Oh yeah, a lot. I think that was what was interesting, is trying to think, okay, what story? But I loved that you said, it's hard to talk about, not because it's emotional, but because it's released, right? So that really, like, for me, struck something bigger along the lines of like, okay, if it's released, how do we approach the story that's part of our life as it gone, right? And it's still also being released, and it's not hiding, not wearing the masks. It's what you said, co-creating, you know, like you are in charge of your story and your life. So what story do you want to tell, you know, and what brings you internal peace? And for me, on a release story is I have, for the longest time, thought I'm not good enough for anything, anyone, any job, any situation. And that has been so detrimental to the way I've lived, the way I've looked at life. So I'm not necessarily giving a specific story because that was my story. So everything else lived from there. Well, this person will leave, or you'll lose this job, or too good to be true. So my coach has always worked with me on being able to release that. And I finally was able to start to move through that. And it might come back up, right? Like release sometimes does return in different ways. But for me, that was just this like aha moment. But I can tell you that it took the work to get there, to realize these things. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't a quick valve release, you know. It took a minute, but being able to let that go has started to open so many doors and just more views of possibility, of what's out there, instead of being held back from this internal landscape of I'm not good enough, or this person hurt me, or well, it's just hate, whatever it may be. Really creating space, really releasing, I think is and not attaching to the story. Like maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Or, you know, like one side of the story is good, the other side of the story is good. So don't be attached to the outcome, and then you can really kind of be set free, you know, and release.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. Well, continue, Christie, if you had something.
No, but it's interesting because, you know, I've only known you for a few minutes, but I think you're fabulous. and you're amazing, and
Thanks.
You're beautiful, and you just have just this realness about you. So if that ever happens again, you just need to surround yourself with the people that see you for who you really are.
Well, and I think that's why I'm sharing that, because I think that is, you know, like what people think of me or compared to what I think of myself is probably a big struggle for, I would say, a lot of people, you know, like, and so being able to release your story, whatever story you wrote, and create a new one, that's like the beautiful path forward as compared to this specific story or this specific thing. It's really doing the internal work. It's really coming from a place of like just belief of who you are and like own it, you know, so.
And I think those shifts too, though, like when you work on yourself and allow yourself to forgive and surrender, you start attracting people into your sphere who are also in that place, right? And so you're like open to it, and then the people step in, and it's like this broadening of your concentric circle of like people who are also real and doing the work, and like also able to come from a place and a perspective of like peace and not holding grudges. I mean, we've all had those situations where we're in social settings and it's really easy to get in like a gripe fest on something, and it feeds off of itself, right? So I think once you're able to say consciously, like, I'm not gonna feed into that anymore, like from my story, then you create a different relationship with the people around you. Yeah. And I was actually going to ask you how, now that you guys have stepped into this space of like being conscious about what you're creating in your life, how does that impact your relationships?
Well, I'm fortunate in my, I'm married to an incredible guy who saw all of my flaws and loved me anyway, and he's such a great person that he inspires me to be a better person. But I think for the longest time, you know, I talked about the walls and the masks. I think for me personally, what happened through my experience is I got beat down. And so there was so much insecurity and so much self-doubt, and so I created masks and walls to avoid that, and I think I showed the world someone different. And with my husband, he's too smart for that. So, and I think he really helped me. I think the process started before I met him, but he really helped me to just be authentic and to realize that it was enough to just be me, that I didn't have to be somebody else. And I was in that process, I think, anyway. It obviously took a long time, though, to get there.
What about you, Nikki?
Oh, I definitely think it affects my relationships, from friends to mother to boyfriend, just across the board, because then I can show up not holding those grudges. I can show up as just the real me, and so, and then creating space for the good stuff, right? Like that's where I think release is the most important. Is it's like, if we hold on to all of that crap, like, it doesn't really ever serve you, And so, and just being able to move through and show up completely authentically, I think you have to have release. And so that's where it is really powerful in relationships. At least it's what as I notice in my relationships.
Yeah, because don't you know people who, I know some people that I think they have a story about themselves, and they've told that story so long that that's their truth. Mm-hmm. And that might not really be who they are.
So how do you help someone in that instance? Because we all see that as we move through life, right? And like, depending on the context, if we're at a cocktail party or we're grocery shopping or we're in a yoga class, I mean, I think what this podcast has shown me is that everyone wants and yearns for connection. Mm-hmm. And connection is so instantaneous. I mean, you guys just met today, and I think already there's like this chemistry, and you're talking about real topics. So how do you call someone on that or help them through?
I feel like I'm doing that with my kids, but I don't know. You talk. You talk first.
I think, once again, it's case by case, right? Mm-hmm. How people will be, what they'll be open to, and I'm a big believer in planting seeds, just like little by little, and you see this growth. My roommate and I were having a pretty cool conversation last night, and she was like, "Will you help me figure this out?" And I had no idea that was what I was doing in that moment or conversation. But it's just, if you have these tools, then you can help kind of plant seeds along the way for people, and then one day they're like, they may not even know where it has come from, but they start to realize, like, self-love and all of those tools that come together to help them be really who they are, and then just encourage. I think that's important too, like, and sometimes showing up for people just by simply saying, "I'm here." Like, I had a best friend when I went through a crappy time. She would call and she would text, and I would just not care, because that's where I was at. That's what I needed. Not care about her. It was, I needed to just be alone. And months down the road, she was like, "I knew." She's like, "I was never upset. I just knew that that's what you needed and needed space." And that for me was huge, because it allowed me to be me in that moment. So I think sometimes it looks like that too. Just, "I'm here. I love you."
Yeah, so
it can be so simple.
Trust.
Yep.
Yeah, so trusting that your spouse or your significant other or your friend isn't going to, and I think this is something that comes with age, but trusting that people are going to accept you for, flaws and all, but helping somebody. I think, being a real, true friend that people feel like they can come and talk to you and that they trust you. And I'm not sure how you establish that. I don't know how that happens. I like to think that I'm a good friend to my friends, but I'm not sure how you're a good friend other than just loving and not judging.
And showing up.
And showing up, mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you being authentically you creates space for them to say, "Oh, okay, so she can say all that, cool. Well, then now I feel a little bit more freer too." Yeah. Maybe, another way to show up or help support if somebody needs that.
Yeah.
Well, and I like looking at relationships as, you know, people kind of holding mirrors up to each other, right? So if there's a difficult or awkward interaction, I think what I've learned is to let it go and to have compassion and forgiveness really quickly, and then to kind of let the other person off the hook, you know, so whether they realize it or not, if they come back and they're like, oh, you know, we had that situation, it's like, it's okay. I realized it was more about you than it was about me, right?
Yeah,
and just
absolutely.
releasing from that and not feeding into whatever drama could potentially be there. So I think, Christie, like saying, you know, it's a lot to do with age. I think sometimes it is. Just realizing like the majority of the stuff that happens around us has nothing
doesn't
to
matter,
do with us.
It just has nothing to do with us. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's such a hard thing to teach, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I have a 10-year-old daughter. You have a 10-year-old son. And, you know, to teach them that the little things that are happening with their friends at school, it just isn't that big of a deal. It's a huge deal to them. But, so I guess the best we can do is teach our kids to be good, kind, compassionate people, because I think you're right, being compassionate and giving people a break. Like, you know, yeah, you were a jerk yesterday, but I still want to play with you today. I still want you to come over and play with me. Yeah, I think compassion and trust.
The keys to release.
Yeah. Yep.
And trust yourself, compassion for yourself.
Yeah, right.
I
Be
think,
kind to yourself.
I think that's often missed. We talk about self-love and everything all the time, and like, that's great, go to the spa, or, you know, like, I think sometimes self-love is looked at that way, and don't get me wrong, like, totally do that. But I think also, like, having a little, like, grace and compassion towards yourself, like, really, truly just, holy crap, like, sitting down and, like, acknowledging what it is you do and who you show up for, like, you do more than you think. So I think that it's important for people to really look in and say, wow, like, high five yourself in the mirror or something, you know?
Yeah, like if you were to step away and look at that person as if it's not you, it's somebody else, what kind of compassion would you have for that person? You know, like me, that little girl, what would I say to that little girl? You know, that little girl who's thinking everything I've ever done in my life is wrong. And I can step back now, look at that little girl and think, you poor little thing, I just want to give you a hug. And yeah, so compassion, be kind to yourself. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could talk for another hour, but we're going to wrap things up. I wanted to invite you to share any ways of contacting you if people were interested in reaching out. If you don't have any interest in that, that's totally fine as well. But
if anybody wants to reach out, you know, I work in-house for a company, so I don't take on clients, except I'm always willing to help somebody. I would never say no to somebody that needed some help. And so, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Christie Babalis, Babalis.
Perfect.
And Facebook.
There you go.
Yep.
All of them.
All of them. Not Twitter.
You can find me in yoga classes, a yoga retreat that we're doing in Costa Rica in October. It's horses and yoga, beaches. It will be phenomenal. And that's Oak and Willow Studio. So it's oakandwillowstudio.com, like the two trees. So that's where you can find me at.
Perfect. And I wanted to thank Park City TV for being our media sponsor here with the Ignite podcast. If you're interested in finding out more about Wild Women Tribe, we are online at wildwomentribe.net. We've got lots of really fun summer wanders. Nikki's going to be hosting one of them with us. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.